And welcome back to Top Cheddar Sports. It is NBA Tuesday. And so today, what we're going to do, since Spencer and I have already covered every team and done the season previews for each individual team in the NBA, I'm just going to kind of recap where I have all of these teams in the Eastern Conference finishing this coming year, and then highlight a team or two that I think might surprise us and make some noise, and a team or two that is kind of on, I don't want to say upset alert, but kind of disappointment watch, if you will. So let's start from the bottom and work our way up to the top. So the team I have that I think will be the worst team in the Eastern Conference, probably the NBA this year, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. At the bottom there, they finished 14th in the East last year. But if you'll remember when I was going over their season outlook, and if you didn't watch it, go click on that Top Cheddar Basketball playlist and go watch the Cleveland Cavaliers season preview. But they really didn't bring in anything. They literally did like nothing at all. Drafted another guard, which I don't really think they needed. I just don't really like the Cavs at all. There's nothing about them that makes me think that they won't finish last in the Eastern Conference. Moving up from there, we have the Chicago Bulls. They finished 13th in the Eastern Conference last year. I have them at 14th. It's different team, same story there. Just literally haven't done anything. No, really, both of these teams don't have a great outlook, don't have a great looking future. I mean, hopefully things can get better for them, but as of now, I really just hate those teams. Which brings us to the Washington Wizards, who finished 11th in the East last year. I have them finishing 13th. The thing about the Wizards is they still have pieces that they could trade. They have assets, and these assets, I think, will be moved. Both Bradley Beal and John Wall is what I'm talking about. I think both of those guys will be moved, and I think that they'll be able to really speed up this inevitable rebuild that they're going to have. Also, that said, though, they were without John Wall most of the year last year, so I'm curious if John Wall is healthy. Maybe they'll finish better than 13th, so that's kind of something to look out for, but I'm just assuming that they're both going to be traded because I do think that's more likely to happen. 12th in the East, I have the Charlotte Hornets, who finished just outside of the playoffs last year by a game or two. They finished 9th in the East. I have them at 12th. The real reason why is they really didn't do much aside from lose Kemba Walker and replace him with Terry Rozier, which is an obviously big downgrade for them, and I think that's really going to hurt them while some other teams got a little better in front of them. So I have them finishing 12th, and right above them, pretty much with an identical record, I have the New York Knicks at 11. They finished dead last. They were the bottom of the Eastern Conference last year at 15th, but I think Zion Williamson's going to have a very good rookie season. Not quite good enough to get them into the playoffs, but I like the Knicks to be vastly improved. They also did make a lot of free agent signings, as mentioned in the season outlook video. A lot of power forwards coming to the Knicks, but I do still like what they did there, and they're definitely going to be an improved team. They're not going to be the worst team in the East. Mark my words on that. So I like them to finish 11th. Atlanta Hawks, I had at 10. They finished 12th in the East last year. I thought that they would be better last year than they were. And so I'm just taking that same logic, basically, and applying it to this season. I think the Atlanta Hawks are going to take a step forward. They have a few good young pieces there. I do like Trae Young. I thought he had a good season. And I think the Hawks are kind of just a team that's built by just like a foundation of solid players. They don't have a star. I can't really remember the last time they did. I guess Joe Johnson. But I really like the Hawks just as a whole, and so I think that they'll just be in most games and find themselves with about 30, 35 wins maybe or so. I don't have any of these teams not in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference with a winning record. That's been pretty typical in recent years, and I have that trend continuing. But ninth and just missing out on the playoffs is the Detroit Pistons. They were the 8th seed last year. kind of caught everyone by surprise. They stuck in the playoffs. I certainly didn't expect them to be a playoff team last year. But they leapfrog teams like the Heat, the Wizards, the Hornets, the normal kind of playoff teams, I guess, the Cavs, but without LeBron. And they snuck in, and good for them. They have a solid, decent team, but again, kind of like a lot of these teams, they just there's nothing there that really gets me excited about them. There's nothing there that makes me think they can be better. So ultimately, I do have them just missing out on the playoffs this year in that 9-seed spot, right behind the Orlando Magic, who are my 8th seed this year. So the Magic were 7th last year, the Pistons 8. This year I have the Magic at 8 and the Pistons 9. So each one just taking one step down. The Magic are bringing back essentially the same exact team that they had last year. Really no major additions, no major subtractions. The one big addition, I guess, is that Markelle Fultz will be healthy for them this year. So obviously still a lot of potential there. We'll see how he shakes out. I'd like to see him do well. As a Sixers fan, I honestly would. I'd like to see him succeed. He could be kind of an X factor for the Magic. If he really doesn't play well at all, maybe they slip out of the playoffs. If he really does well, I could see them being as high as the 6th seed even this year. So he's kind of the X factor to watch for. But they re-signed Nick Vukovic, which was the biggest and most important thing for them to do this offseason, and they got that done. So good on the Magic paying Vukovic, who's vastly underrated. The 7th seed I have is the Miami Heat. So they were the 10 seed last year, and they actually they lost Hassan Whiteside. They lost a decent amount, but I really like the addition of Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler, I mentioned in these other teams how there's no one player that, they don't have a star, they don't have a player that really excites you. Well, the Heat do now. So the Heat lost a lot, but they brought in Jimmy Butler, and I think that alone, Jimmy Butler alone, can carry the Heat to a playoff spot this year. And I expect that to happen, so I have them at the 7th seed. I don't have them I have them and the Magic very close, and even the Pistons. But I do have them finishing in the 7th seed and making the playoffs again after missing out last year. Which brings us to the top 6. So these top 6 are the real contenders in the Eastern Conference for me. 7 down, obviously, I don't give them any shot of making or of winning the Eastern Conference. And even the 6th seed, the Toronto Raptors, who finished 2nd, obviously, last year, I don't have as a huge contender, but they're one of those kind of sneaky teams, I think, that could maybe make some noise. But I have the Raptors 6th. Obviously, they lost Kawhi Leonard, who was the heart and soul of that team. And while they're bringing back essentially the same team that was around Kawhi Leonard, they still don't have Kawhi Leonard. And he's a top 5 player in the NBA easily. It's really going to hurt them. So I have them finishing 6th. They'll still be a playoff team. They still are a good team. But to sit here and say that they're going to be a top seed in the East and a legitimate contender in the East still, I think would be foolish to do, and so I'm not going to do it. The 5 seed, I have the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets finished 6th last year. I only have them moving up one spot. They obviously had a very big offseason, probably the biggest in the league, debatably. Them or the Lakers, I would say. But I don't think the Nets initially this year have really gotten much better. And I'll tell you why. I've always called D'Angelo Russell, if you ask Vic or Spencer or anyone, I've always called D'Angelo Russell kind of like a poor man's Kyrie Irving. I see very similar play styles with each of them. So obviously, D'Angelo Russell left, Kyrie Irving came in, and that's essentially, for this year, the only real big move that they made, aside from some depth pieces moving around. And I just don't think that gets them initially this year that much better. Obviously next year when Kevin Durant's back, they are going to be one of the top threats in the Eastern Conference. They'll probably be a top 3 team in the East. I really like that team then. But for right now, with just Kyrie playing and Kevin Durant still injured, I have them as the 5 seed and not any higher than that. Which brings us to our 4 seed, the Boston Celtics, who finished 4th last year as well. Now, Boston had a weird offseason. I think they got better at point guard, getting Kemba Walker over Kyrie Irving. I just think he fits Brad Stevens' system better. I'm not saying he's a better player overall, but I think he fits in with the Celtics better, and I think ultimately that will make them a better team. They lose Al Horford, which is a big, big loss for them because they didn't really get a great replacement for him. I think that'll hurt them defensively a lot and just hurt them in some of these matchups with these other teams in the Eastern Conference. Al Horford was the one guy on that team that he shut down Giannis Antetokounmpo. He shut down Joel Embiid. They really don't have a guy, I don't think, on that team anymore that can do that, and so I think they're going to struggle against the teams like the Bucks and Sixers now. So that is a big impact there. But to say the Celtics got much worse, I think it's just wrong. They still have a very deep team, a very young team. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, they're going to be great. So I don't have them going down at all. I have them finishing right where they finished last year as the 4 seed. 3 seed, Indiana Pacers. They finished 5th last year. I have them moving up, essentially because they're bringing back virtually the same team, except add Malcolm Brogdon to that and add a healthy Victor Oladipo back to that lineup. I really, really like the Pacers. I think they've always been slept on. They're being slept on again this year. They are a threat. They're a legitimate threat to win the Eastern Conference and represent the East in the NBA Finals. They are my biggest team to watch this year in the Eastern Conference as a team that might surprise people in the sense that I think they could legitimately win this conference in the playoffs. I think they'll finish 3rd in the regular season. The 2 seed I have is the 76ers. They finished 3rd last year. I have them moving up slightly, basically just ahead of the Raptors, who they finished behind last year. Sixers, almost the same team, replaced Butler with Richardson and Al Horford. They lost TJ McConnell as well, which really hurts, and I cried about it twice already, but I'm not going to cry about it again because I'm a grown-ass man, and I shouldn't cry over things like that. But the Sixers, ultimately, I think they're not going to miss a beat. They pretty much ran it back as well as they could. Obviously, losing J.J. Redick hurts. They didn't really get a shooter to replace him. So I think they could have some difficulty spreading the floor. But ultimately, I think they're going to give more minutes to guys like Furkan Korkmaz, Jonah Bolden. I think Josh Richardson will fit in very nicely. I think the Sixers will be fine. I think they'll be essentially the same record as last year. And the Sixers are also a legitimate threat to win the Eastern Conference this year. Many are picking them to win the East. I don't quite know if I'll go that far yet, but they are a legitimate threat. Certainly one of the top 3 contenders in the Eastern Conference, which brings us to the Milwaukee Bucks, who I have finishing right where they finished last year, 1st in the conference. Same team minus Brogdon. I don't see that really impacting them a ton. Malcolm Brogdon's a great player, and I really like his fit with the Pacers, and I liked his fit in Milwaukee, but Milwaukee still is going to get better. I think Chris Middleton still has another level. I think Giannis, the reigning MVP, still has another level he can reach. So this team's going to just continue to grow, and the fact that they're pretty much running it back completely, they're still going to have that great chemistry together. So I really like the Milwaukee Bucks to still finish 1st in the East. I think a lot of people are kind of sweeping them under the rug, if you will. They're not getting talked about as much as they were last year, but I don't think there's any reason to not. And they are also a legitimate threat to winning Eastern Conference this year. So if I had to now give two potential surprise teams and 2 potential disappointments, I'm not necessarily going to say surprise as in they'll win the East or whatever, but I did already mention the Indiana Pacers legitimately might be my pick to come out of the East at the start of the year here. I just really, really like this team from top to bottom, and I know they're motivated because still to this day nobody talks about them. So they're my one surprise. My other surprise team is the New York Knicks. I'm not saying the Knicks are going to make the playoffs, but they might. I obviously don't have them in the playoffs. I have them as the 11th seed, but I will not be shocked if they squeak in as the 8th seed this year. They brought in a lot of veteran pieces, made a lot of underrated moves despite everybody being upset that they didn't even offer Kevin Durant anything and Kyrie didn't want to go there, so on and so forth. I still like what they did, and Zion Williamson is going to be a very, very, very impactful player in his first year, I think, especially on that team where there's no reason he can't get as many minutes as he wants. So the New York Knicks and Indiana Pacers would be my two teams to watch for as potential surprises. Now, my two teams that could disappoint. Number one is the Brooklyn Nets. I already mentioned I don't really think they got that much better. And for that reason, I think they could be considered a disappointment to a lot of people. I can't foresee a scenario where they don't make the playoffs in this Eastern Conference because I don't think it's a strong conference at all again this year. It's very, very top-heavy. I think in the East, you're going to see what we saw last year in terms of, like, three of the best, like, five best teams in the league are in the East, but the depth in the West is so much greater than the East. So I really don't see them missing the playoffs, but I could see them potentially dropping to a 7 or 8 seed. It all depends on how Kyrie Irving kind of meshes with the rest of that group, and if Karis LeVert can continue his success. He had a career year last year. There's a lot of moving pieces with the Nets. So they're one team to watch for, and the other team that I think could potentially disappoint is my other playoff team, and that is the Miami Heat. In my mind, the Miami Heat are like one Jimmy Butler injury away from not being a playoff team. After all the moves they've made this offseason, I think that would no doubt be really kind of devastating for Heat fans. I think they expect to make the playoffs, which is fair. I just don't think the Heat have very good depth, and honestly, I'm not in love with their starting five either. There's something about that team that I could just easily see screaming just bust. So that is definitely another team for me to watch out for to disappoint this season. But that'll do it for this NBA Tuesday edition. This was a longer one, but we had a lot of teams. We had 15 teams to talk about. So let me know what you think. Do you agree with these standings? Who do you have as your top teams in the East? Who do you think will finish in the bottom? Did I miss a potential surprise or disappointment? Because you could definitely make an argument there's a lot of potential surprise teams this year. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know who you have winning the Eastern Conference. Leave a like, leave a comment, smash that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications, and I will be seeing you tomorrow to cover the last two teams in the NHL and wrap up the season previews for that before the puck drops in just over a week.